Hey, you are live on YouTube.
Okay.
You don't.
Hey, Tammy.
What'd you say?
Tammy,
Yes.
Frank can't get out.
I'm going blind anyway. Does that make a difference?
Yeah. Tammy did this one, so I'm not sure how.
Off the radar. Off the reservation.
Oh, shit, you know, it's a great program.
What am I missing?
Ready?
Not quite. Claude.
Thank you.
So you were inside.
Oh, okay.
You on board, Gene?
No, not.
You're not?
I
Your
don't-
hand,
And I'll change it.
your hand getting on?
Okay.
Oh, on board of this, yeah, but I'm not on this board. I'm just here to listen.
Okay.
Yeah, Gene's got a square. He's there.
Is he up? I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the Arpa Task Force meeting. I am a new member. I am co-chair with my good friend Supervisor Bramer. We're going to try to solidify our list, get some idea of the associated costs. Ethan is handing out some last minute literature. And with that, I appreciate being on the board. I'm really excited about working on it. And I'm going to turn the meeting over to the co-chair, Supervisor Bramer, if you would
Yes.
do it.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
Supervisor Dickinson.
Okay.
And the numbers over there on the wall. All right, we're just getting started here in the room, and I know Mr. Gaddy is passing out some things for the committee members here that did come by email last minute, so hopefully you can get those for anybody online. Beth, Supervisor Wild. I'll look for other committee members online. Okay, so the first thing that we have on our agenda for today is updates and housekeeping. And item A is stakeholder outreach and project idea solicitation. If you'll remember, we did do the survey out to the public back in the fall, and that was to get an idea of impacts that were felt in the community by just regular people, individuals. A lot of times we don't necessarily see the impacts at the county level because we have been able to do so well in our sales tax and occupancy tax, but the pandemic definitely was hitting people at an individual level. I remember one of the things that we saw in that survey was mental health recovery was really important. Other just health impacts, that kind of thing, and impacts on our businesses, our small businesses for sure. So anyway, after we did that, we did a second round of stakeholder outreach to the public, and there was a survey for any organizations that wanted to submit project ideas. That is still ongoing. And we have at this time, you'll see in your information from Ethan, there is a summary sheet. It just says update on ARPA project idea submissions. And I'm sure you have not had a chance to look at this yet, but maybe Ethan can give us this a high level overview of some of the ideas that have come in so far. I know that we have the raw data. It's not that great looking, and Ethan is still going through and trying to summarize some of it.
Just connecting here.
It's okay.
Hi. Cool, thank you, Supervisor Bramer. Yeah, since our last meeting in, I think it was December or early January, we had an opportunity to launch the project idea solicitation form. So that was put out via social media, press releases. It was in the Post Star, our website. And to date, we received about 36 project submission ideas through our portal, and then a few additional ideas via another portal that we used, and some other project ideas that we received via email or telephone. I haven't had an opportunity to put all of those together in one spot at this point, but to date, the project ideas vary. Most of the projects have come from not-for-profit organizations, a lot of the groups that are serving the most vulnerable populations. From the stakeholder list that was developed from this committee, there was a lot of emphasis on those not-for-profits and those community organizations. So we heard a lot from them. It turns out that there's a lot of need there. And it's going to take a little bit of time to sort through all the project ideas that we've heard at this point. Right now, the highest project, was about $600,000 of funding, ranging all the way down to $8,000. Some project ideas did not have any budgets associated with them. They were more, hey, this was an impact from the pandemic, and I think we should be looking into this. Whereas, it may have been an individual resident that didn't quite know who the partners were, what organizations could help them, but good ideas nonetheless. So I did email this group some of the preliminary project submissions, about 36 pages of those. It's going to take a little bit of time for everyone to go through. I'd encourage everyone to, in between now and the next meeting, to at least take a quick look at those. During that time, Wayne and I can go through some of those projects. We can look at, see where they actually fit into the ARPA funding, whether or not they're even eligible. We'd also like to look at the project submissions and figure out, hey, are there existing funding sources that are out there for these groups? People did submit great ideas, but I think every week we're realizing that the state and federal government are, outlining new grant funding programs. Wayne just met, I think, regarding the CARES Act yesterday. And already we've looked at some of the project ideas and said, hey, this actually might be a better fit for CARES Act. So one of those key considerations that was handed out to this group at the first meeting was, let's not just plunder from the ARPA funding when we could use other funding for this. So it's going to take a little bit of work to sort through that. We'd also like to, do additional follow-up stakeholder outreach. A lot of these community service organizations do have really high needs, but they have overlapping missions. They have multiple jurisdictions, whether it's Warren, Washington, Saratoga, or Warren, Essex counties. And I'm a community planner. I'm not going to pretend to know all the answers about what these people need or how they can work better together. So I think we're going to need to continue as we look at the project ideas to talk to some experts in the field. So that will just be ongoing public engagement. Open to anyone's suggestion about how we convene a group of those people. I think we'll have a clear idea once we have an opportunity to all look at the project submissions. So one of the things that we are going to need to do is, one of the next items on the agenda is looking at these priority areas. Once this group has reached consensus on what some of these bigger impacts were, we can start looking at these projects and assigning them to these areas and these spending categories. We'll have a clear idea about eligibility and how much money we're looking to allocate towards these.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's still a work in progress. It's ongoing. We're going to leave the project portal open. We're going to continue to analyze them, look for other funding opportunities, and look at partnerships.
Okay, that's great. I haven't been able to look at them a whole lot, but there seem to be some really good ideas. There also seem to be potentially some overlap in the ideas. So we want to make sure that those organizations are talking to each other first and come maybe with a combined request, or not to reinvent the wheel. If there's already something happening at the county or through the county, it looked like Liza put in a lot of ideas.
Yeah, and those were good partnerships between like Crandall Library and her organization. The Salvation Army had some excellent ideas, and we have multiple municipalities, we have other funding sources, and we have our funding. So it's like, once we have a clear idea of what that project idea is, we can start getting to the nuts and bolts of what's the best funding source for it.
Okay, but you're going to help flush that out for us. And the portal will stay open for how much longer, do you think?
Indefinitely. We haven't set an end date on it. I don't know if anyone here wants to close it anytime soon. We made it pretty clear with the project submission portal that it wasn't a guarantee of funding. It's it's an opportunity for people to submit ideas.
Okay.
So it's the will of everyone here. It's what you want to do. I would encourage it, once you have an opportunity to take a look at the project ideas, you'll see that some people are very detailed, others it's a little bit more just an idea, and it's all good.
Yeah. Okay, good. I think we can leave that open and see where we go. Yep. Go ahead.
Chairwoman, two things on that. I think as far as keeping the portal open, that has to be bound by what our end game is and when we decide to present the finals. I think we need a couple months probably or whatever that timeline is, to close the portal to be able to finalize submission to the Board of Supervisors. That's one. Two is we have a number of nonprofits that do overlap each other in scope and in need. So they're, but they have different clients. So I just want to make sure that we're going to flush everybody out. Where the Salvation Army helps homeless and those in need with food and clothing, there's other North Country Ministry and so on that do the same, but they have different clients. So I just want to make sure that before we lump everybody in together, that we're able to have the conversations with the individual organizations to make sure who are they reaching, how much did they get hit by the pandemic? Because we all know that everybody suffered through this, but certainly our nonprofits and a lot of areas took a double hit because a lot of our businesses weren't able to contribute as robustly through the pandemic because they weren't sure what was coming on.
Yeah, actually,
Thank
to your point on that, what we did hear from a lot of the community service organizations that they were, they depend on volunteers for a lot of their work. And the pandemic resulted in a lot of people that are of the age to volunteer, not working 40 hours a week. They're older, they're more susceptible to COVID. And so they weren't showing up. And that was a huge part of their workforce that just wasn't there. And that was sort of, that was eye-opening. I didn't really consider that, but it was, volunteers are more vulnerable and they really did suffer from it.
Well, Ethan, something that you said and that Mr. Biddle just said too is about making sure that we have these conversations. So I think that's really important that we as a committee invite these, maybe we put them into categories and say, all come in and talk to us about what your needs are, even though they may have some overlap. There's going to be differences. And like you said, the different populations who are served, different areas of the county, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that would be worthwhile. Additionally, we did hear from a lot of the not-for-profit arts organizations, Performing Arts Park Theater, Charles R. Wood Theater. And that's another group that did slip through the cracks with some of the COVID relief. I did speak with committee member Beth Gillis here from Lake Champlain, Lake George Regional Planning Board. And there has been a lot of support for for-profit businesses, but less money is out there at the federal level for not-for-profits in the arts.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Madam Chair, it's Mike, if you don't mind.
Give me just 1 second. Supervisor Wild, I'll call on you next.
Chairwoman, just want to make sure, I can't recall if on the survey that we sent to the potential applicants, did we have on there, did you receive government stimulus money grants? I figured, okay, thank you.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, we're going to take all that and we'll have some fancy charts and we'll break down respondents by entity type and so on and so forth.
He didn't have enough time to make the fancy charts for today.
Right.
That's okay.
That's what we do.
That's okay. Supervisor Wild.
Thank you. As I've mentioned before, this is a once in a generation kind of investment. And as I look through some of these projects, they all have value, but I don't see an easy way to rate one versus the next. I always look at benefits and what's the return on our investment. And I know it's going to be hard to do, but I'm looking for some way to be able to weigh one versus the next. Otherwise, we'll just end up giving all our money away to everybody. And how do we know what kind of return we're going to get on this investment to help our community?
Supervisor Sieber.
Thank you. As it relates to some of these submissions that have come through, and I think the intent here was always similar to what we're seeing other counties do, which is reaching out to the community and saying, where have you been impacted, where you haven't been able to get assistance previously, and how can these once in a lifetime dollars really not necessarily result in a revenue generation or a benefit, but rather how are we going to help our community be resilient as we move out of a pandemic and recover and rebuild with each other, along with the county and some of those issues that have been very specific to COVID. When I'm looking at some of these, I am wondering if there is a way that we could proactively as a group agree that if something is a government entity, perhaps we could refer that government request to the appropriate committee, or whether it be the chair of the board or the chair of finance. I mean, there are some things in here that I read and I think that should be a function of local government. And we certainly have the funds to be able to look at some of those different types of events balance and different ways to help our community all the way from Glens Falls north. And it concerns me that we're looking at ARPA funding for something that I think is a responsibility of the county to kind of meet some of those needs. But also as it relates to some of the things that might fall within occupancy tax. And fortunately for us, Supervisor Dickinson chairs that committee. And I think that that's also an opportunity for us to make a referral over to occupancy tax, where we are having a very healthy balance and continue to see some growth in that particular area that where normally wouldn't be for ARPA. And I hope in looking at some of these, Supervisor Dickinson, you may agree that there's some opportunity there as well. So last year we had some people that were filling out surveys on how this has impacted them, and we could quickly hook them up with a municipality that could help them. So it never even made it to this list because we found a resolution and something that was already in place or a different set of funding. And so this whole idea of how are we going to help our community become resilient, I think we need to just have an agreed upon definition of what is the goal of going out and asking for these project solicitations. Is it perhaps, as Supervisor Wild points out, his perspective of there needs to be a benefit, how do you rate them? Or is it maybe there is no benefit to the county? Maybe this is a benefit to our community and how those that have been looked over and not able to get other resources and assistance in those particular areas, how are they serving our community? We don't always make money in county government. That's not why we're here. But I want to make sure that ARPA is going to be helpful and resilient and for how it was designed. So I don't know if there's a way to kind of look through those and start being proactive.
Well, I think Ethan certainly needs time to go through the projects and kind of sort those out. And like you say, maybe flush out the ones that can be served with other funding or other government functions that are already in place. I certainly don't want to reinvent the wheel. As far as goals, I think that is where we're going to turn to in our agenda about the priorities. Because that's where we do need to get some consensus about what we are going to use these dollars for. And we haven't really nailed that down yet. So I'm hoping to do that when we get to item 2A on the agenda. And with that, I'm going to ask Ethan to just, one of the things that we brought for today was this municipal allocation summary. There are a lot of municipalities that are still under discussion and TBD about what they're doing with their ARPA, but we thought it would be interesting to show some of the other municipalities who have already allocated their funds. Do you want to say anything specifically about this, Ethan, or just
There's
FYI?
there's not too many updates from our last conversations about this. Basically, a lot of our smaller municipalities have a lot of underground infrastructure that is extremely expensive thing to maintain, whereas we don't have that at the county level. So we have a little bit more freedom with what we can spend our money on. But, again, it's ongoing coordination with places like the city of Glens Falls that do house a lot of the, community service organizations that we've been, discussing. They've already committed funds to some of those groups. And, Glens Falls does serve, they host a lot of these organizations that serve the entire county. So I think that will be one of the more right areas for collaboration.
Okay.
I mean, we should, consider having, whether it's, Jeff Flagg or the mayor himself to come in and maybe have a direct conversation with this group. Might be
Okay.
worthwhile.
That's a good idea. Okay. All right, moving on to 1C, updates on rules. Ryan, do you want to give us anything on that?
Sure. I've viewed a lot of the NACO webinars and the materials that they put out, and I'll just read to you some of the key highlights of the final rule. There was a little bit of more spelled out in terms of what are eligible uses and what are not eligible uses. One major piece was on the lost revenue calculation. As you all know, we calculated something early on that was, I don't know that I have the exact number in front of me because I updated my sheet, but it was between $9 and $10 million based on the 2020 revenue losses when we followed the Treasury's formula. One of the revisions that Treasury made is to allow a larger growth factor. So the new number that we could get for revenue recovery just for the year 2020 is $10,912,944. The revenue recovery doesn't mean that the county is putting the money into its own pocket. It's rather, it's the major thing that NACO was able to get done in that category is essentially ease of reporting, where as long as an activity qualifies as a general government activity, something that the county would otherwise do, then you can use your revenue recovery funds to report that activity out of there, rather than a different area of the ARPA program that is more, administratively challenging and where the reporting requirements are a little more stringent. So the other piece is rather than do the calculation, NACO allowed for an option to just collect $10 million if you have an allocation that's that high, or if you don't, whatever's under it. So rather than do the calculation, you just opt for the 10. I think in our case, we obviously already do better than the 10 doing the calculation, so we do the calculation. The revenue categories expanded to include utility revenue, liquor store sales. There were new presumptions put in for which populations are impacted, which populations are disproportionately impacted. There were some clarifications as to capital expenditures. If you're going to put a capital expenditure in and report it under the capital expenditure category, if it's over $1 million project, then you need to do enhanced reporting, including find 3 alternatives and explain why your proposal is better than the 3 alternatives. There were broadened eligibility for water and sewer projects. Culverts were the big one that NACO was able to get added into water and sewer infrastructure. And there were some expansions in the broadband area as well. That's just a nutshell. If anybody's interested in a deeper dive, I would highly recommend you get on the NACO website and check out their summary.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. The bottom, from all of the discussion at NACO, at the NACO conference, the biggest, I don't know, big picture takeaway for me was that the new, $10 million revenue recovery rule just means that we have a lot more flexibility in how we use the money and the ease of reporting that you mentioned.
Right.
We still want to try to follow the original guidelines, in my mind, as far as the use of the funds for pandemic recovery and resiliency and support to our communities. But if we put it in the, revenue recovery line item, it's a lot easier for us to report it.
And an example of that would be, I'm sorry if I'm talking out of turn, but for more of the economic development related projects, it is advantageous to do economic development and revenue recovery rather than in a different category where you might have additional restrictions.
Supervisor Seaver?
Thank you, Chairwoman. To that point, we did take a lot of training at NACO, and hopefully everyone's got their final rule guidance that I dragged back from DC for everyone. But the one thing that Matt Cheese had really highlighted to us was, yes, it's easier to list as revenue recovery, but there are limitations on how that can be used. If, for example, you did something like Saratoga did and put a certain amount of money aside for not-for-profits, in the way that that's something government wouldn't normally do. So if you put that 2 million, say, into revenue loss, you can't use it for that purpose. It's gone. And right now we only have half of our 12, and I think the other 6 is coming in June, maybe?
Sometime this summer.
Yeah. So, I mean, we want to be mindful of that, because again, as we're recovering and coming out of this, now's the time that these organizations need help. So if we throw all 6 into revenue loss, we can't help those organizations, because that's not a traditional form of how we would normally operate within government. So I would just ask that we're careful on not lumping what we have right now all into revenue recovery, because it's easy, but also I see value in some of it, but not all of it, because I think we'll be limited on how we can use it.
Yeah.
That's not my understanding though, is that even if we tag it revenue recovery, we can still use it for this other purpose, the economic development.
Yes, as long as it's, but to Rachel's point, as long as it's an activity that if you think about the general fund, if the Board of Supervisors is going to pass a resolution authorizing a service or a contract utilizing general fund, expenses, if that's something that we can do and that we typically would consider doing, then that'll fall into revenue recovery. If it's something that's way out of the ordinary or that otherwise wouldn't be allowed for the county to spend, that we cannot do under revenue recovery. And there are
Okay.
some specifics that are carved out that you cannot spend revenue recovery or any of the ARPA funds for that matter on. And those are contributions to a pension fund. You can pay for the employer share of pension that goes out of payroll. You cannot do anything that undermines COVID mitigation. So you can't, pay people not to wear a mask or something like that. You can't violate uniform guidance, conflict of interest requirements. You also have to abide by federal regulation when it comes to how to use and how to report using federal dollars. You cannot use this funding to directly result in a tax decrease. We couldn't just pocket 10 million and say we're cutting property taxes by 10 million. You can't use it towards debt service. You can't put it in a rainy day fund. We can't just say, okay, we're stocking it away in the general fund and our fund balance goes up 10 million. There's going to be a restriction where it's not part of the unrestricted general fund balance.
Okay, but let's talk about what we can use it on, and that's gets us to 2A. These are the things that kind of have been floating around since probably December, but we as a committee or task force haven't given our, full blessing as to this is our list. So I wanted to make sure that, or Dennis and I wanted to make sure that we went over this today and got consensus on these are the areas. And maybe we don't include all of them, but I just see them as broad categories of funding areas that we want to put money towards if we can. Obviously, we're not going to be able to fund every single thing. Look at what Ethan just told us. This came in already $4 million of requests in wasn't it something like $4 million?
Yeah, approximately.
So, we're not going to be able to fund everything, but I think that these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever they are, 7 different broad categories are the priorities that we saw coming out of our public survey, some of the stakeholder input that we've already received. So I'm opening this up for discussion and debate on our priorities.
And you're talking about this sheet here.
Yes, it's marked draft and it's dated January 21st. So my understanding is it came out for the January 18th meeting, but there were some tweaks made to it after that.
Yeah, some minor tweaks. And, and just to pile onto that, in addition to discussing this as a committee, I think, once there is some consensus on it, we could, post it on the county website, our ARPA page, and, just let's keep the comment line open. If someone feels very strongly about these priorities, let's just allow them to send an email and see if we're on point with this. This is supposed to be a boiling down of what we've heard to date from the public survey, from our conversations with different groups and amongst ourselves. So
that's true. And I guess always in the future, if something came up, we could change. We could
Yeah.
still tweak this. It's not like we're saying, we're not committing ourselves to spend every single cent of the 12 million just by looking at this list. Supervisor Seaver.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Then just for points of clarification, looking at this list, under infrastructure, I assume that would encompass septic. There's lots of discussions about septic and sewer under ARPA funds. Would that be correct?
Well, it talks about sewer and water. Are you suggesting the septic replacement funding?
Well, based on harm, based on need, based on, a little different than some of the grants that we've had in the past where it necessarily wasn't always based on income or need. But also we had a lot of great input from the public, even about access points and different ways of utilizing and assisting. They were very clear at NACO that as long as there was some type of harm, you really couldn't go wrong with identifying those types of resources from the ARPA dollars. But I guess I just wondered a breakdown of what the definition of infrastructure was, and then workforce support. Would that include diversity initiatives, and would it include childcare? And then for immediate response, what exactly that means? The rest of them I can pretty much figure out.
I'm going to take a stab at the first one. I think if we want to leave ourselves some room to add money for septic, we should include that because sewer is obviously not the same as septic.
Mhm.
Is everyone okay with that? We'll just kind of sewer / septic there under D. And then workforce support, DEI, I think would have to be added. Diversity, training, but childcare is certainly there, right there.
And again, these are all examples that, I'm sorry. May I?
Go ahead.
Thank you. These are all examples that, were highlighted during training, both at the state and the national level of many. And I believe Chairman Dickinson, I did forward on to you and 7 or 8 different plans that were filed with NISAC from different counties where they've already invested their dollars, and some really good examples. One of them being, some really interesting takes on affordable or housing affordability. But I know I've heard from many different childcare, preschools, fire departments, concerns about recruitment. So I can make a category for a lot of these different things, but just in those particular areas, I was hopeful that we could agree that septic sewer would be under infrastructure, workforce support could include the DEI and the childcare.
I'm not seeing any committee people being upset about that. Ryan, did you want to add something or
Yeah, just to
object?
No. Just to flesh out septic, I have the final rule pulled up and here's what it says. It says installation, repair, or replacement of private septic units continues to be an eligible use for these funds under the final rule. For example, eligible projects include those that address groundwater contamination resulting from faulty septic units, and that those would connect failing septic systems to centralized wastewater. And the same applies to wells. You can
That's
connect
great.
properties that are on wells to public water.
I feel like some of the people who asked for funding through the septic replacement fund, some of them were to connect to the up county, I think it's in Hague. They wanted to connect to the
Mhm.
sewer and the money is not eligible for that, I don't think. So that maybe we do set aside our money to help people because we know there's already however many people who have asked for funding and we couldn't fund them yet. Wayne?
I guess one of the overriding things I think, or does it override the umbrella, is that it's a vulnerable population group that we would service. Or is it just open to anybody? I mean, typically these funds are for the vulnerable or at-risk population groups.
You mean ARPA funds?
Yes.
Yeah. I do hear what you're saying there, Wayne, but when we talk about other things like public infrastructure, it is helping everyone. It's not necessarily boiled down to vulnerable populations. Supervisor Hogan, why don't you come to the mic?
Madam Chair, I have a question also, if you don't mind, when Supervisor Hogan's done.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just want to caution that while I would like to see every community have their dreams met, you're on a slippery slope with that one. Connecting people in Hague to a sewer is a worthy expense, but perhaps it would be an expense that the town of Hague should be looking at. And I'm standing here absolutely 100% able to speak to this kind of stuff because I'm in a community that desperately needs a sewer system. But I'm not asking you guys for money for that because I don't want to see this turn into the Hunger Games. So I just ask you to really slow down, consider your words, consider your commitments, wrap your brains around the needs. Wayne spoke absolutely perfectly to overlaying that with vulnerable populations. Thank you.
Supervisor Wild and then Supervisor Seaver.
Thank you very much. I've brought this up before, and I'm wondering if there's any guidance in terms of creating a revolving loan fund for something like septic or for some other activities that we might be able to help the vulnerable populations with. And therefore, that money is reusable. And we can use it again and again and again. So have we ever gotten any clarification in terms of whether we can do that or not?
I don't know of any. Wayne?
I would actually, I believe Mr. Moore here did do some look into the revolving loan topic, and it would, I think it's possible. I think it does revolve extensive reporting throughout the life of that funding. So depending on how big of a fund that would be, I mean, I think, Chair or Supervisor Sieber mentioned before, like, hey, maybe we talk to some other committees about spending money on this, because if it's like, hey, we're going to do a $500,000 revolving loan fund, it's worth the time and administration to be constantly reporting on the federal level for a program that we all think is a worthwhile expense for our county. Maybe it's not something we do for ARPA. It would free us from a lot of reporting requirements too.
Just 1 second. Supervisor Wild, did you have a follow-up?
Well, I'm just thinking that, it's not something that we'd make money on, just something that gives us an opportunity to spread this around at multiple levels and multiple times. So maybe we just put an interest rate that gives us ability to cover our reporting. But I'd really love to see something like that for just for a portion of this funding, if we can make that happen. Thank you.
Supervisor Sieber?
Thank you. To that point, I think there are entities within the county that Supervisor Wild also sits on, like LDC and some other organizations that have talked about meeting some of these needs. But one of the concerns that NACO did bring up was just that, these revolving loan opportunities, that then there's an added expense of going out for someone to manage that loan, to report back on it. And ultimately, the county is always responsible. You can't give your responsibility of monitoring these funds off to, even if you do it to a not-for-profit in terms of a grant, all that reporting comes back to the county. So I understand the need and the concern about, we don't want this to become too cumbersome for the county either. And it's wonderful to see other counties, maybe there's models that we can not reinvent the wheel, but utilize some of the formats that they already have in place for those checks and balances. But Supervisor McGowan had pointed out to me as well, even in this municipality anticipated spending, which thank you for doing this, Ethan, this is great, that Hague is taking a look at using some of those ARPA dollars for exactly what Supervisor Hogan had brought up, and each municipality has prioritized their different types of needs using this funding. But as it relates to a county, I think it's important to look countywide. And I also think it's really important, as Wayne said, I'd like to include the septic inclusion just so that we can be creative as we're looking at things. But that vulnerability, again, going back to harm, has there been harm? And I think maybe that could be one of the clarifying qualifications as we look at these applications coming through or diverting funds, as can we identify harm? Whether that be physical, emotional, financial, to the community, to an individual. But if harm as a relate of the pandemic is something that we can help alleviate, particularly as they start to come out of it, then I think it's a success in how we utilize the funds.
Mm-hmm. Just a second. One of the things that I thought Glens Falls was doing, to your point about, can we see what other municipalities are doing with their funds? I thought they were adding additional dollars to their LDC for loans, a loan program to small businesses. It's something we could look at. I mean, we have that in the last bullet there, G, local business and nonprofit support. Wayne and then Supervisor Thomas.
All right, couple things. I've been here at the county for a while. Everybody snickers. In that time, we've done probably, close to $40 million worth of grant programs, maybe, let's see, we're on CD 78. So probably 110 different programs. This program here is an administrative nightmare. The level of reporting and detail that you would need to do individual awards versus a block type award is, it would bury somebody, really. And I've got to caution everybody about that we administered the county's LDC for years. We did loan programs before it went over to the LDC, the EDC. And I think Beth can point out that doing a loan program is labor intensive. And there's a lot of hand holding, a lot of paperwork, a lot of follow up. So I think it would behoove us to look for existing entities that are already undertaking an activity and allocate funds to those versus trying to do something new and innovative on our own as a county. So having said that, my concern would be that these funds sunset in 2026, roughly. They have to be expensed. is there been an answer? If you do a revolving loan fund, do those funds sunset in 2026 and have to be either repaid or full, or, you know, gone? Because they're still ARPA funds as you're recycling them through a revolving loan program. And I don't have the answer for that. So I think that's something that we need to understand, is what is the longevity of this funding? It's always forever tagged as ARPA funds, much as the LDC has community development block grant funds, and they're forever tagged with those program criteria.
I think that's something we're gonna have to look into. I don't think we have the answer for that today.
No,
Yeah.
I think it's needs to be explored.
Supervisor Thomas and then Supervisor Dickinson.
Are these items on these two sheets here, A through G, are they prioritized now? I mean, is
I don't think they're in any particular order, Frank.
Okay.
Right, Ethan? No, they're just, these are the areas, not, A is not number one.
Well, I would actually say A probably is A would be number one for immediate response.
I think this is how it was listed in the initial program guidance
Mm,
in this order.
Okay,
Yeah, I think A is number one and B is probably the second one, but then the C through G is a little bit, a little more freeform there.
I would think that would with A, the immediate response, I would think we have a pretty good idea of what that's gonna cost. Right now, it would seem like to me.
I think we do. And if you look at the agenda under 2B, those are some of the things that have already been outlined by staff and Administrator Moore as immediate response items for us to consider.
Okay.
Dennis?
I think you're gonna have difficulty with including private septic systems. All of your private septic systems that are in your zone of concern with your sewer transfer are lakefront properties. Generally speaking, people that have lakefront properties have money. So it's not a money issue about their septic, it's getting them to do it. The other thing is you're really going to micromanage that if you're talking about dealing with individual owners and septic systems.
Mike? Okay. Go ahead, Supervisor Seaver.
Thank you, Mr. Biddle. Listen, I think we're getting bogged down in some of these other, all I wanted to know was under infrastructure, was that an applicable expense? Not to make a proposal to fix the county septic problems. We have a septic committee that I have no doubt will be working hard on resolving all the issues called septic. But when we look at the immediate needs, I mean, that resolution 453 of 2021, can we go through some of these and see if we can move some to the full board for some expenditures for
Okay.
approvals?
Yes.
Because I have some questions about Countryside, but listening in, say, yesterday about the airport change order, I wasn't convinced that that would fall under ARPA until I really heard the explanation behind the reason that the government won't pay for the additional cost of it, but the feds won't, or the state, whoever that was, why it's now down to us and why that's a need and how that falls under a pandemic, a result of the pandemic. And I think other than just vulnerability and harm, when you're looking at municipalities looking at, is this an increased cost because of the pandemic? And that's a good eligibility factor. But I was wondering if we could.
Yep.
I just wanted, not that I don't respect the concerns about septic, I just wanted to make sure, because we've learned so much about what's eligible and the sky is the limit, but we only have 12 million and 6 million sitting there now and a lot of need.
Before we do that, I just want to see if there are any other changes or additions to this list. I have the two that you added, sewer/septic, knowing that we are still trying to prioritize vulnerable populations and probably people with low income.
Mhm.
And then the other item under workforce support would be diversity equity programs. I think in my mind, that goes towards the being retention and what's the other word for hiring new people. But anyway, I think that can go under workforce support.
And childcare.
Yes, childcare's there.
Under
Childcare's there.
workforce?
Yes, it's the first item. And with that, as long as we're okay with that, I don't think we need to take a motion or anything. Like Ethan suggested, we can say, this is our list. We'll put it out on the website and I'm sure people will offer their opinions on that once we put it out.
Yeah, I
That
think
it's
that's,
come from the committee.
I think that's a good approach. I mean, I think we did hear a lot about the criteria, being able to prove harm, providing for vulnerable populations, considering the administrative burden of it, considering not diffusing the funding to the point of inefficiency, and, how to be sustainable about spending the money. And I would almost, as you look at the draft priorities that point you back to the draft guiding principles from October 19th, the first time we met, in which it sort of outlined in one page, what are some of these criteria we should be considering in these investments?
Great. Okay, so with that, we will go right on to 2B. Thank you. And that first item is immediate response to pandemic. I'm going to turn this over to Ryan to talk to us about these 5 things listed here, which add up to, I sketched it out as approximately $2 million.
Okay, the first one, I can take these one by one, or I could just do them all and then we could discuss. What's the pleasure?
Yeah, let me back up for a second. I guess, Dennis and I talked about this and we thought there's two different areas here. This immediate response that we think the committee might get behind. And then all the rest of the money that we're not going to talk about today. But if we were to go forward with these immediate responses, it would be taking out 2 million of our 12 million and really allocating it and going forward.
Right.
So setting that aside and then knowing that we still have the other 10 million that we're going to talk about, we still need to reach out to stakeholders. We still need to, flesh out the project solicitations, all of that. That is how I see us going forward. And certainly if Brian, if you want to go through, just give us a high level description of these 5 and then we can discuss them.
Sure.
And we don't need to come out of today with anything unless people feel really strongly about one or all of them, all these 5. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. Resolution 453 of 2021. This is an item that helped us to balance the 2022 budget. We had all equipment requests, major equipment requests from departments. We pulled them out of the 2022 budget and we instead paid for them in real time last year. And this would essentially be to reimburse those. Some of the highlights, some of the larger expenses that fell into that. We had, for instance, the blinds that are here in the boardroom. We had 2 VMS boards that the sheriff's department utilizes that were burned out from being used so much during COVID for public messages, for vaccine clinics. There was $45,000 for technical equipment in the jail, $15,000 towards a tractor for Countryside. And so on. But the overall expense, as noted on the program here, or in the agenda packet, added up to $251,580.
Okay. Give us the next one, please.
Okay. The airport change order, this came out of facilities yesterday. There was a cost overrun with the snow removal equipment building due to escalating costs associated with the pandemic. This project so far, it was supposed to be a 90-10 project, 90% state revenue, 10% county. The DPW has been able to so far utilize grant opportunities to not have the county pay into this project. But the cost overruns, we would have to pay 100% county share, and that's $68,308. That was advanced to this group by the facilities committee yesterday for our consideration.
Editorial on that. It's not on your agenda because it just came through yesterday. So I guess that's a number 1A.
It's on this sheet.
Yeah.
Is it? No, not that one. On their actual agenda has the 5 that we're originally talking about for immediate response.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it didn't dovetail with that.
That's okay.
Okay.
That's why I just want to give people that editorial.
Yeah, I'm on the grid here that Wayne and Ethan provided. The next item, $100,000 for Office of Emergency Services. The idea here was that if we had supply needs, PPE, masks, test kits, et cetera, that we did not have, we were not able to source, that we could have this amount of money set aside and designated for emergency services to purchase those supplies. We've thankfully had a great partnership with the state of New York, and we've gotten our test kits and our masks, large supplies of them through the state. So this is essentially an item that we could still consider as a what if we're in the position where we don't have those resources anymore from the state government or from the federal government, and we find ourselves on our own for, God forbid, future wave of the pandemic. We hope it's over, but we don't know.
Okay, but those aren't dollars. So my understanding that there were dollars that we had already expended. You're suggesting this just a hold.
An allocation,
Okay.
correct, yeah. So there's two steps to the ARPA process. One is to allocate funds to a project, and then the second step is to actually spend them. So if you allocate funds that you don't necessarily need to spend, you can reprogram them for other areas.
So if we were to allocate this and then we don't ever need it, we can
allocate
pull
it
it
back
back
to
and
something
put
else.
it. All right.
Right. Same thing for IT resiliency. These are, the idea here would be that the county experienced the having to go remote at the drop of a hat. And for the most part, it worked out well, but we did find that there were expenses associated with that, with upgrading laptops, cell phones, tablets, and the like. Which get into county resiliency and our ability to weather another one of these. So the idea here, and we took, again, $250,000 as an allocation, not necessarily saying that we spend all of it, but that we could take this allocation, go out to departments, say, what additional do you need in order to be in a better position? You see all the investment that we've made in this room so that we can do Zoom meetings, so that we can do YouTube streaming, so that we can make the way we've had to function for the public. If we were to do a similar thing in the committee room, that's an example of how to improve the way we function for situations like this in the future. So all of that would potentially fit into IT resiliency. DSS has some security needs over there for new server elements like that. So what we would do is we would get all the needs together from the departments, and we would go from there.
Is this 250 rolled up of kind of some rough estimates, or is this, it seems pretty high?
It's again, if we don't need it, we reprogram it.
It's not lost to the world.
Right.
Okay, Wayne.
Right.
It's a 5-year funding allocation.
Right.
What you have to look is it's not all going to be spent day one.
Okay.
That, in my mind, I've programmed it out 3 different years. 100,000 up front, 100,000 the next year, and then 50,000 a year after that. I mean, that's how I'm looking at it.
Okay.
Not all of this is an upfront expense.
Okay.
It's just an allocation.
All right.
The next,
Countryside.
yeah, the next two items, Wayne can speak more intelligently than I can, but I'll just say to introduce them, I believe the countryside, we have a larger need than that. We did a study with the Beardsley Group several years ago for investments that need to be made over at Countryside. Some of them have been made. We're working our way down through the priorities. And the outstanding need, I believe, is over $2 million, Wayne. But the reason we penciled it in here for 950 is, again, to keep it under that $1 million threshold I talked about earlier for reporting. And the administration piece, I believe, was just a number that was put in based on 3%. Is that right?
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah, if we need it, if we find the administrative, if we're doing a lot in the revenue recovery category, it'd be a little easier. Regardless, I think it'd be helpful in the planning department if we had some sort of allocation towards the administrative time we spend on this.
Okay, hold on. Let's pause on this one. Mike.
Thank you so much. I guess I need a definition. Wayne said that there was a 3-year projection on this. I just need a definition of what immediate needs is.
Immediate is, we've identified that these things need to occur roughly now, or at least the allocation so that it can be programmed into how we function. So, if we know that in year 2, part of this money is available in year 2, we can rotate, at least for equipment. Not everything is all going to drop dead at the same time. If you buy a bunch of equipment in 4 years or 5 years, when it all drops dead, then all of a sudden you've got to replace it all. Here, if you allocate it out over a couple of years, and I think what we're going to find in this is as we move along, more things are going to pop up. And we want to be able to respond to that. And that's kind of the mindset that I had. It's an immediate need identified by IT, whether they're actually going to be able to get the equipment. We're going to have to order it. But as part of the countryside discussion is doing the HVAC upgrade there to MERV 13 requirements. We are at a 36-week delay in getting the units. So we can order them right now, although the project has not gone out to bid. Number one, they've gone up 110% in price since the Beardsley report, and there's a 36-week lead time right now. So what you have to do is be able to say, we've got the money to go do this. Hopefully we can get the equipment when we need it. But you can't order it until you have the money. Right, Mike?
Correct.
Mhm. Go ahead.
So I totally understand where you're coming from, Wayne. I guess in my mind, I had immediate that it would be something we'd have to spend in the next 6 to 12 months. And that if there's, this is just in my mind, and that if there was something further out, that maybe that should go into under infrastructure or further out. If you had to order something now, I would consider that immediate, right? Because that's beyond our control. I get that. I'm just comparing in my mind immediate when people are hungry and they have food insecurity, right? I'm just trying to balance out the hardworking people of the county and that they need computers compared to the mental health and anguish that's happened here in the last 2 years, the food insecurity, and a lot of the other things that have been going on. I'm just trying to fester that and get that through my head. That's all. I'm just trying to balance that out. And I just share that with the team. That's all.
That is a number that is subject to discussion. I mean,
Sure.
we don't have a hard number against that right at the moment.
Thank you so much.
So
Supervisor Sieber, and I see you just now, like Mike, sorry.
I think that the definition of immediate need does need to be addressed, but also to Mr. Biddle's point, there are some very much crisis related needs. And I don't necessarily see us taking that into account. I would like to see an itemized list, like when you're talking about IT resiliency equipment. I think there's part of that idea was we went into a pandemic not prepared as a county. We weren't prepared with whether it be a portable printer or a laptop, cameras on laptops. It was amazing how many people couldn't work from home or didn't have a cell phone. Looking and learning from those lessons, utilizing Zoom, recognizing that we couldn't have productive meetings in this room if you couldn't see the people or hear them. And so it became an immediate response, an immediate need. Those were the types of IT equipment needs that I thought we were looking at. How do we make sure that our staff is equipped to respond and to work remotely should that situation come up again, but not necessarily if something isn't working, that we had some backups to give people, but more along the lines of what's that immediate crisis. And I would like to see at least this first batch of the 6 million that we're really taking a look at where's that immediate need, where's that crisis. And I have a really hard time getting behind the countryside piece of it, because I'm not so sure that that isn't something that as county taxpayers, as a county as a whole, that we should be looking at. We've invested a lot of money, it feels like this year, into countryside, but we've talked about this for a long time now. So I guess I have some concerns about having such a big number through ARPA, and to the extent of the administration, if it's extra work that planning is doing and saving us money from going out and doing a consultant, and they are bringing on someone to do some additional work and managing and recommending and this research above and beyond, then I think maybe not 400,000, but like, what is that immediate need in the next 6 months to start to look at that? Because again, we have 6 million now. And it's not going to do a whole lot of good if we keep holding on to it and not providing it to where the need is. So I just keep going back to need.
I know we are, I mean, we're on a good path though to get to a point where we can start distributing money. We definitely don't want to hold on to it forever. Supervisor Wild.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I look at this and I appreciate Mr. Biddle's comments. I think they're spot on. But as I look at this list and I reflect upon the financial status of the county, the only one that I could possibly support is the countryside, because we're talking about impacted residents. And the seniors would be the most impacted of any through the pandemic. And that's the only one that I could support, because I believe the county with its financial position can absorb many of these other costs, because we've done so well during the time of the pandemic compared to other counties. So as a voting member of the board, the only one that I could support would be the county, the countryside piece. And thank you.
Well, there's some views. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The other thing I just have to get into my mind, and I'll need all of your help on, is what's standard G&A expenses for the county? So what should fall under the county budget, or normally, say that we didn't have this COVID, would we need these computers for the county? Question mark and question mark. And if that's the case, should it go under the county expenditures or should it come out of ARPA? And I'm not just looking at the computers that way, Wayne, it's only because it was brought up.
Sure.
But I'm just looking at everything in that lens. I don't want to say the things we should be funding are extra, because that's the wrong word, is the wrong, under ARPA. I'm just trying to get my arms wrapped around what should we as an advisory committee advise. X goes, okay, great idea. That should go under standard G&A or expenses from the county. Y, great idea. That should go under ARPA. And I assure you there's no cut and dry for the most part, but I'm just trying to figure out in my mind to get down some path to divide between X and Y. Thank you.
ahead, Wayne.
I will say that if it wasn't for personal laptops and personal cell phones, the county business would have ground to a halt. And that's not an expense that is reimbursed to employees. I think the county needs to be positioned to provide that equipment. That's what this is.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
And I'm not arguing with the need at all. We're running into the same thing, even double over in Washington County, because you add on, like in the northern section of Warren, it's almost endemic through all of Washington County, lack of broadband.
Yeah.
So I totally get it. I'm totally with you. I'm just trying to figure out which buckets.
Right. You think you're trying to find the nexus between, say, the impacts of COVID and the spending, or should we be doing these infrastructure upgrades anyways?
Correct.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the only thing that stands out to me is like the airport change order. That might be one of those things that you would conceivably fit into general government spending, right?
Thank you.
Mhm. Well, that makes it difficult for us as co-chairs, since I'm not really feeling a consensus about moving any of these 6 forward right at this time, Frank.
But the increased cost of steel was due to COVID.
There's the nexus. Yeah.
I mean, I.
Yeah.
think
There
there's
could be a lot of
nexus on
hair
lot
splitting.
of these. And there's also the argument that a lot of these are government services. But I also hear your point about the immediate needs. And when we go back to our priority list, which we just got consensus on, they are things like testing, PPE, staffing, equipment, public education, vaccination clinics. And then the number 2 priority, if we go with what, Frank asked about which ones are actually priorities, senior facilities. I mean, I'm, to be honest with you, very torn about how we go forward right at this minute. But we don't have to make a decision today also. Yes, Supervisor Seaver.
I just think what we're highlighting here is exactly what we had hoped in this committee, is that we would have a blend, that we wouldn't be making the decisions just as government officials, that we would be involving the community and outside partners in that discussion. It makes it harder, it makes it so that we're torn, but it also makes a better product in the end. And that's why we went out for a survey and said to our community, how can we help? This isn't supposed to be easy. And I applaud both of you to taking on this and the support that you both have from your fellow supervisors. But this committee, and I verified it with our county attorney, I'm sure he's happy to confirm it since, I stated a Holiday Inn Express once. I don't get to be an attorney, but Larry, you had said that this committee can push forward resolutions to the full board for consideration. I would hope, like any other committee, we're going to have some disagreements. We aren't all going to agree, but when it goes to the full board, if we've done our job here and we've done the education and the research, hopefully it's supported by the full board. And if someone needs to vote no, they vote no, and that's fine. And if it's not enough of a support, then maybe we need to do a better job in educating what the goals of this committee are. And maybe we need to do some more work on where that immediate need balances that nexus point.
Yeah, I think that we're getting a little bit hung up on this first immediate need spending category here. And we do have these three other categories in front of us today.
Well, to be clear, I don't want any more. I don't want to move forward with the other three. I think there's a lot more work to be done on how we flush those out, and especially considering the other priorities that aren't really identified yet on this section of the agenda at the bottom. B, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dennis.
Were you done, Ethan?
No, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I do think that there is a pretty good justification for most of those immediate spending items in terms of, the first resolution, those were expenses incurred because of the pandemic. Office of Emergency Services, obviously, the pandemic's not over. We still need to be able to respond to it. For IT resiliency, personally, as county staff, I was using a tough book that was very outdated, not be able to connect to some of these, critical, if you can't connect with a county laptop to the server, you can't do business, and county would stop working. We do, mental health, public health, all these important things. Like that's important for disaster response. Countryside. I mean, Countryside is one of the few spots that we have left that we actually really do put our money where our mouth is and take care of our most vulnerable population. It was the seniors and administration. Selfishly, the reporting requirements of the ARPA spending are pretty intense. I know Ryan's been looking at this a lot. That our Treasury Department is looking at it. It's not easy. In-house, we can't necessarily do all of this, and considering using some sort of outside, depending on how we decide to spend this money, some sort of accounting or different group that's very well versed in this. I know there's examples from other counties that have used specialists in this. I think you could speak to that, Mr. Moore.
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
There are.
Let me turn to my co-chair, see if you have any recommendations.
Just some thoughts here. I think we have to remember what we're doing. These are immediate things that should be looked at now. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to move this short list out on the road. Secondly, the costs are minimal. What are you looking at total cost here?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch.
What are you
all
looking
that.
at total cost on these immediate needs?
They add up to about $2 million.
So you're talking about $2 million. We got 12. Well, we got 6 now, but we'll eventually,
We only have 6 right now to spend.
yeah,
Right.
we'll eventually.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
I can lose my train of thought by myself.
I can relate to that.
So basically we're we picked these out and said they should be taken care of immediately. And you're talking $2 million, and I would like to see us move them out. After that immediate thing, then the rest of the things are open for discussion. And my feeling is that's when we need to sit down and start really prioritizing what we want to spend the money on. Childcare for single parents is absolutely tantamount in my mind. We have a great deal of trouble in Lake George with getting help, and childcare is one of them. You're a single mom, you need to work, and who's going to take care of your child? You can spend more on childcare than you make. So that's really important to me. There's a lot of them that are really important. And at the proper time, I would put my 2 cents in to prioritize that. But some of these other things that we'd like to do, to me, aren't as nearly necessary. And the other thing is you have For example, Lake George got almost 300,000. We have $300,000 worth of things that we want to do. We have more than that we really want to do, but we prioritize it to meet our 300,000. And I think that's what we're going to need to do once we get past this immediate need.
Yeah,
I tend to agree with you.
I would just say too, it's
Write
like,
that down.
Hold on, Ethan. Hold on. Hold on. Treasurer Swan wants to weigh in. He hasn't said much.
Thank you, Chair. As far as the computers and the IT, just as a FYI, we tried in the treasurer's office to work from home. We did not have the equipment. We did not have anything that we needed to do it. My staff was here every day, all day during the entire pandemic. Not what I wanted, but it was the only way that we could function, and it was the only way that the county could keep functioning, because without us doing our job, nothing else gets done. And the other thing, I'd just like to throw my 2 cents worth in on the administrative costs. And so there's no way with what we're talking about here, there is no way that what we have existing in this county can do the administration for this. So that's going to have to be an automatic expense right off the top to administer all these things. And the further I would like to say, if we're going to be doing this like a grant program, in other words, giving money to businesses or whatever, somebody, and it's going to have to be that administrative program, has to verify
Correct.
all of that stuff that's done. They have to verify that the money was spent properly, because we're going to have to go back to the feds and say, yes, we gave X 50 grand and they did spend it on X. And my office is the one that's going to have to be saying, yes, that is the way it is. So
It's a lot of money to track. And I think,
Yeah.
and I think our staff over here would agree that they're not equipped right now to handle all of that on their
well,
own.
it's not even equipped. And don't take this wrong, gentlemen,
No, no,
the
it's,
expertise.
that's a good point. Yeah. I
I'm
was
not
just
trying to
thinking
downgrade
time
our
and
planning.
bandwidth.
I just,
I mean, the expertise that we have here, I don't think is going to be able to handle some of the things that this group is talking about.
I want to go to Wayne and then Supervisor Wild. I saw your hand.
All right, couple things that I wanted to just highlight. When we talk about on this sheet, administration, by using some ARPA funds for in-house administration in the office, it frees up 127,000 plus of grant money that we can now use directly into Countryside, in addition to the request for 950. What has happened at Countryside is the initial proposal or estimate from Beardsley report in 2019 was roughly about 2.5 million of kind of immediate or priority needs in the building. We've since had another 2 engineering reports done and that have identified further issues. But really, when you look at the Beardsley report and you put in multipliers and adjustments, the numbers that we've got right now from Clough Harbor for the upgrades and repairs to Countryside is within $100,000 of where projections should be. Given that in the construction trades, the latest journal came out and that material costs alone are at 110% of where they were 2 years ago. The total estimate for Countryside right now, the shortfall that we're seeing right now with between the grant funds, the county bond that's out there, and the capital reserve fund is we're $2.6 million short. If we make up 950 out of the ARPA funds, which they are an eligible entity and population group, then that still leaves the county on the hook for about 1.6 to 1.7 million additional. That once the bid documents come back, we're going to come to the county and say, you know, what are you going to do? I mean, we're looking at basically 40 years of deferred maintenance in that building. And there's 38, 36 people that reside there, plus the staff. And if you take a look at the 267-page report from Clough Harbor, that building's not in good shape. So
Supervisor Wild.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I can change my opinion on the admin because I do realize there's going to be a lot of effort for us to manage this. But from the IT standpoint, I'm not sure what the useful life of this equipment is, but if we're buying additional equipment in 3 to 5 years, we're going to need to replace that. So it's going to come out of the general fund anyway. So that's why I'm not really in support of that. The county did function through the pandemic, and I can't see it. But thank you very much. You know, just to weigh in on what Wayne had to say about Countryside. There is, and Wayne, help me out, red flag or something like that. But basically, if we don't upgrade Countryside, then we could be forced to close that. And I don't think that's in the best interest in the county or our constituents. Thank you very much.
I guess I will say the county certainly understands the importance of Countryside. No one's talking about not investing in the upgrades that are needed. It's just what pot of money do we take it from? And I think that's this policy debate that we are having right now. While I agree with my co-chair that it would be great to move some of these forward, I think that it may be beneficial to have some of the itemized lists of these things from the 6 flushed out a little bit better, provided to the committee, and bring that back to us next time to see exactly what we're spending the money on and try to get a consensus at that time.
Can you do that, Ryan?
I think there's a time issue with Countryside.
Yes.
Boy.
But if I may just add to that, the airport, Countryside, and the jail abatement and whatever are referrals from Facilities Committee for action by this committee. So I think this committee needs to say yay or nay. So then goes back to Facilities and Finance to figure out how to address these issues. But these are referrals.
I don't see anything. What was the other thing you said? Jail. We're not talking about the jail today.
But that was referred.
But we're not
committee.
saying no to it. I mean, I agree.
Okay.
We'll have to give them a decision at some point.
All right.
On the,
Do we have a number for the jail?
Yeah. It's on the sheet.
it's on the
230
other
and
sheet.
175.
230 and 170.
230 for abatement, 175 to
Yeah,
gut it.
yeah, yeah. Yep.
That's 400,000.
Okay, what is the time sensitivity about Countryside?
We need to know what the county's desire is, or if you're not going to fund it, then we're not going to do a bid document. And, you know, Department of Health is going to have to be appeased somehow. I don't know what the answer would be.
Pay them off, it's got to be less than the repairs.
I mean, I'd like to have a meeting in even a week, another week.
I'm game.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm game about the meeting.
Kevin Hagel's brought it up yesterday or yesterday at Facilities that, you know, there are things that need to be done there. And so it's just a matter of where you're going to pay for it. To me, it's not an option of
right, right.
doing the work. It's where you're going to pay for it.
What's the ballpark number for that?
It's 2.67 million is what it
You're
is.
looking at that?
We are not going to use,
No.
No.
we don't want to go over the $1 million on
Correct.
ARPA funding, but anyway, yes, Mike, and then
You're looking
Supervisor
at
Seaver.
nine something, right?
950 is what we were
Michael.
looking at.
So that's what we need to move on.
Gentlemen,
I just would urge my colleagues here that whatever mapping process and application process that we use for everybody here, nonprofits, business, infrastructure, cities, towns, municipalities, be used for the immediate needs as well. So that we're not okaying something, A, that we're not fully informed about, but B, that people that are applying after aren't saying, why did they, doesn't matter who the they is, why did they get special treatment? I know this is immediate. I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing, probably not arguing that this needs to be done. I'm just saying, is there a way for us to get something here for, if we're having a meeting next week? Because the other thing is, this is phenomenal. First of all, Ethan, did you put this?
No.
Who gets the blame for putting that? Blame's the wrong word. Who put this together?
I did it.
Oh.
What are you talking about?
This is awesome. This is awesome. Who put
I'm
this?
guilty. I'm guilty.
All right, Wayne, this is phenomenal. But the key is, we just saw this, so I just
Yeah.
wanted a breath to take a breath for a week and then get the application information that we need, that we would require for anybody going forward. Thank you.
All right, so yes, Rachel, sorry, Supervisor Sieber, and then Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak before you as a co-chair of this committee. To Mr. Biddle's point regarding consistency, I think that's incredibly important and for the transparency of this process. But I would just caution my colleagues here today to be very careful about utilizing this or having it perceived as a slush fund. We seem to find almost every single committee meeting, someone saying, refer to ARPA, use ARPA funding. And frankly, whether it's $1 million, $2 million, 300,000, whatever it is, that's a lot of money that can help a lot of different areas. And I just last month heard that this wasn't an immediate need, that we weren't, and nothing horrible was happening to our community because this committee wasn't meeting, that we weren't doing our community any disservice by not meeting. And I still remain that that was a disservice to our community, that there is a level of urgency in these fundings because it's related to a pandemic. And to that point, I don't think we ever thought we'd be here looking at $10 million more in sales tax. And when all of this happened, we thought, oh my goodness, how will we even survive? The county wasn't equipped. And I think we need to take some ownership in that. Well, last year when we looked at that strategically of, oh my goodness, we're still in this. How do we make it better? We started investing in that equipment. We started investing in what we have here today. We're not perfect and we have a long ways to go, but I think we made significant strides. And maybe now looking at our sales tax numbers coming in saying, okay, we can do more with these ARPA dollars. And what does immediate really need? What does crisis need? And to the point about any of these expenses under immediate, we're going to continue to have immediate needs. We're not done yet. We're just seeing some of the impact of the pandemic. So I'd like to know how the numbers are determined. To the point about consistency with applications, I don't think that's unfair. Just because something got referred here this week or last month, do you know how long sometimes it takes us in committee to make a decision to move on a resolution? This committee sits here and is committed to every single week to meeting. That's wonderful. We recognize the priorities here, but it doesn't mean just because it was a referral from a committee that we need to rubber stamp something and push it through. I think we need to take a really sensitive look, have those consistent guidelines, and then also sit here and come up with those common terms that we agree upon. But to the point of why we didn't meet, because we didn't have a first vice chair or second vice chair, our county attorney stepped out, but I did have an opportunity to meet with him. What he did say is that we have co-chairs now. They are equal. So we do need to ask for a recommendation to our co-chairs for a first chair and a second chair so that we can continue to meet in any of their absences. That can be determined by both of these co-chairs. I'm sure that they can make that determination together and let the clerk of the board know and have that identified on our standing committee list to be accepted by the Board of Supervisors so that it's an official document. But I'd hate for us to be in a circumstance again where we can't meet. It is a disservice. So could we attend to that little housekeeping so that we can continue this process?
Are you volunteering to be vice chair?
I
Or would
am
you li-
I
if
am
that's a no,
very
Dennis and I will
interested.
talk about it.
I'm very interested to know who here would have a desire to serve in the capacity of first vice chair and second vice chair. Should there be no interest, I remain happy to help in whatever capacity, but I would like to, particularly community members.
The answer to your question is we're looking into that. We're going to take care of it.
Into what?
The vice chair.
Have you asked people who's interested?
I haven't asked anybody.
Oh, well, maybe we could communicate with the members of the committee and see where the interest and expertise lie.
We're open. No, I forgot what I was going to say. Is that it?
No, it's never it.
Is that enough for now or?
No.
Okay.
But would you ask for that feedback from committee members before we meet next?
Yeah,
week?
if anybody's interested in being vice chair, let us know.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Let the record show.
So, okay,
I have listened to Wayne, and I'd like to make a resolution that we give the county side the chance to firm up those numbers and make a definite proposal to this committee so that we can move on it.
I
Mike?
would like to, so have that come back to us next week.
Yes.
Okay,
Can you
at
do
this
that?
same time next Tuesday.
We can try.
I love to put that pressure on them after they cry and complain.
Oh, do we want to move it to 3 o'clock? Some people had a hard time with 1.
3 o'clock's all right with me.
You'd love 3. I know, Mr. Agnew, I think said 3. There were a couple,
Well,
Beth, you haven't, you haven't weighed in at all. Is 3 okay for you next week? Okay. And Mr. Beatty said 3 was better for him. Okay. And the treasurer. All right, 3 o'clock next Tuesday.
what about?
We'll
my
get the
mo-
notices out. The planning department will get us some more information.
What about my motion?
I don't think we need a motion,
Second.
Dennis.
Wait, are you looking for a motion? Would that
Yeah.
make you feel better?
Okay,
Yes, I'm happy to second his motion, but I would like discussion. I have a quick ask on that.
Go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask that it be done on the project solicitation form. I think any of these immediate needs or requests from the county, if we're going to ask that from the community, it might be a good exercise in what we're missing on the project solicitation form, so we can make some amendments to it, so we are consistent.
Okay.
I'll second that amendment.
And to the point of the other items under immediate needs, I don't think there's any reason why, the airport change order, is that something that Kevin Hajos could come and also fill out that form and present on why that's needed? IT, any of those within that immediate needs. I think that's a good opportunity if they're ready, come next week and do the project solicitation form. Please provide it to us, at least 24 hours in advance or whatever, so that we can review it ahead of time and the public can see it.
Okay.
And then maybe we can move on some of those.
Excellent. You want to vote on it?
Sure.
I actually, Madam or Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure how to go about that to request time.
Go
But
ahead.
I would like if Wayne or Ethan can put some more detail around the urgency of getting this done. The consequences of not having it happen. I think that's important for us to help make our decision moving forward. Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed?
That carries.
Opposed?
Yeah, I guess I should say as amended. Is everyone okay with
Yes.
that? Okay. Good. That wasn't perfectly
Get that
done,
done,
but
will you, Wayne?
I think we're all
Sure.
sort of on the same page. All right. Motion to adjourn?
Is there privilege of the
Oh, right. Sorry, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, just in terms of these immediate priorities, the conversation today was that these should be tied certainly back into the pandemic. I think the one that, because I put it in, the one that doesn't tie the most into the pandemic is the first one, Resolution 453. I mean, I would be willing to pull that back unless anybody disagrees with that, just to, at least clear an obstacle for moving forward.
Okay. Well, I mean, I have to go, guys, for a prior engagement. I'm going to turn it over to you, Dennis.
Holy mackerel.
Yep. Good luck.
Put that pressure on me. Yes.
Mr. Administrator, is there, I think you should come and fill out the project solicitation form on behalf of the resolution and talk about why those fall into the category for some of those, if that's what you want to do. And I think some of them are related to the pandemic, but I think that we need to be consistent and transparent and equally accountable. So why not also spend the time and put that on the proposal? And you already have all that information. It's not a heavy lift.
That would just be a revenue recovery item.
Right.
Be happy to do it, but if I'm not going to make a strong argument that every piece of that's related to the pandemic, because it's not. It's county operations.
Perhaps just for the ones that are.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? Comments?
You put the chair and vice chair on the,
I'd,
on the agenda.
what?
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. Can you put the vice chair as the first and the second on the agenda?
Yep.
Thanks.
We'll do that. We'll have a short agenda for the next meeting being the immediate items. Hopefully we'll have some information so we can move on those. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman,
Mike?
I'm just curious if we had any public comment.
I was just gonna ask that, yeah.
Is Don on?
He is. In theory.
He's in theory?
There he is.
I am in theory, yes, and also physically here.
Is there
We
any-
do not have any comment on YouTube if that's what you're looking for.
Yes,
Okay,
great.
I'm
Thank you.
out.
I have
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you were going to ask for discussion before you did your motion to adjourn. And on that, I just want to take an opportunity to thank our chairwoman from last year. She worked hard on this committee. She put a lot of the infrastructure in place for us to sit here today and to continue this good process and to really rise above and put the efforts that she did. It was remarkable. And I don't know if everyone knows exactly how hard she had worked last year on this. So I wanted to thank her on behalf of the committee.
Rachel, I agree wholeheartedly with you, Andrea. We really appreciate your effort and your work, and because of you, we can move on with this thing, and we do appreciate it. Thank you. And if there's no further comments, we're adjourned.